Welcome to the Canny Conversations podcast, Conversations with a Cause, with social entrepreneur Safaraz. In these podcasts, he shares his thoughts with journalist Adrian Kibler. So, let's join the conversation.
Welcome to Canny Conversations with Safaraz. My name is Adrian Kibler. This podcast aims to bring you a canny conversation with a cause. Conversations that we hope will capture your curiosity cannily. Now, much of the content is contained within Safaraz's books. There are three of them, Canny Bites business books. We're going to be slightly different just for this one because we're going to go slightly off the books and I want to talk to Saf about something which obviously would be difficult for us to ignore. It's not all over, but I want to talk about some of the lessons that we can learn from the COVID incident. And I want to know, Saf, is there any single lesson that we could learn from it? What's the biggest single lesson?
I think the words resilience and adaptability become part of our language and part of what we now often talk about. I think in addition to that, what I would say is that most things that people had perceived in terms of changes, those have come about just a lot more quicker. So there's an element where the direction of travel was there as a country, as an economy, but all that's happened is been a catalyst for the change. So the change has become a lot more quicker. You know, we live in a world in which we often refer to as volatile, a little bit uncertain, and that's proven this year. The fact that there is uncertainty there is some volatility there is an element of unsure, ambiguous, and it is a very fast changing world. I think that's something that we've all come to realise, and our language now in terms of the new norm and unprecedented is another word that often people talk about. Pivoting your business. These words were already probably there and were there, but it's become the forefront of our thinking, how we perceive things, take nothing for granted, and make the best opportunity that you can of the situation.
Do you think that people fully appreciate the impact? One startling figure is that by the end of last year, 2020, significantly more people in the UK had died with COVID than were killed throughout the whole of the Second World War by enemy action. UK civilian numbers who died in the Second World War from any enemy action was about 67,000, way past that number within under a year. So do people really appreciate the size, the extent and the significance of what's happened, do you think?
I think a lot of it depends on whether an individual has had personal experience. If you've been touched by it, if you're aware of it, if it's part of your circle, you have a firm viewpoint. I think if you're also of an opinion where very much thinking that this is a conspiracy, then it's very hard for somebody to think anything but that. But for the general population, I think people see for what it is, can empathise, can relate to the situation, and can see the devastation that it has caused, not just in terms of people's health and well-being, but also in terms of the wealth for the country and our present situation in terms of how we're going to recover from this. And the recovery isn't something which is going to be short-term, it's going to have long-term impact. It's taken us 40, 50, 60 years to pay for the World War. This could be an equivalent where we're talking decades in terms of actually recovering from this. It's something once your thoughts have been stretched, then it's hard to get back to the same position.
Do you think that it will change the way in which we value people? And what I mean by that is, if you look at the people that have really pulled us through, people in the National Health Service, we're talking about care workers, and I know that you're involved in a domiciliary care company. We're talking about other frontline workers in shops, delivery, that sort of thing. And of course, we're also talking about, the scientists that were working on the vaccine. All of those people are share in common the fact that they're not particularly well paid, but they've pulled us through, not hedge fund managers, not pop stars, not footballers, not captains of industry. So do you think that we will, or at least ought to, start looking at the way that we value different jobs?
I think for many years, particularly some of the sectors that you mentioned, they've been underappreciated. And the care sector has been undercapitalised, underappreciated in terms of its role in society. And these are traditionally low-paid jobs, but they have a massive impact. You only need to have personal experience of a loved one being in care to realise the difference that the individuals make. The local pharmacies, the NHS, the care workers, anything to do with the health, well-being, education, they're frontline. You go back to the basics. It is health, it is our education, it is our well-being, and anybody who makes a difference, anybody who works in that, I think this year has been the year where they are recognised. It's whether that recognition is going to be sustained for the longer term. Yes, Clap for Carers has been something that we've all been involved with. I don't know anybody who hasn't actively appreciated the NHS this year or carers this year. I think we've had a common hero or heroes this year, and that's been that particular sector. But it's whether that's going to be longer term, whether that's going to be sort of sustainable and permanent in terms of that recognition. It's not just about recognising, but it's also the government supporting those particular sectors. There's also other sectors which have had it really tough this year, and we can't forget the fact that it's any sector where there's an element where from a well-being perspective, I'm talking about hospitality, number one for me. Absolute devastation, and I really feel for the hospitality sector, the retail sector, particularly the traditional bricks and mortar. The impact is long lasting, and you're hearing every other week job losses, company closures. This is long term damage to the economy, and long term damage which isn't going to be easily replicated or recovered.
I mean, in terms of business and lessons to learn, I mean, this COVID pandemic was not an act of God, it was an act of man, it was an act of folly. The experts, haven't they? They've been saying, the World Health Organization, other experts have been saying for decades that the biggest threat was some sort of viral pandemic, and nobody took any notice. In 2016, the UK government did a major piece of work about looking at the impact of a viral flu, and they found that they were not in a position to deal with it should it happen. And of course it's happened, and everybody was caught with the trousers down, basically. From a business point of view, do you think that there are lessons that we can learn in terms of, if we know that there's a problem and we know that there's a personal threat, don't sort of always keep it in the pending tray, but deal with it, because one day it will come home and bite you. Do you think that's true?
I think what I've noticed this year is that there's the differences that people have with each other, they've been extenuated, and those differences have come out where people have accused other countries, very sort of accusatory comments, and also competed with others in terms of, we will get a vaccine out, we've got a world beating system and so forth, we're better than others. And what we've seen is that it's not like that. You could be a rich and powerful country, but the impact might be more than maybe a less developed, traditionally third world type country. And, we're all on a level playing field when it comes to it. So if it can impact all of us, and it's not just a matter of, how much reserves we have, or, how much power we have in terms of financial resources, or where we rank in from an economy perspective. We've all been hit, and it's been devastating to many first world
And do you also feel that the vaccine, it's essential that the vaccine doesn't just go to, the countries like the UK and, if you like, the more advanced nations, but it is also essential that it goes to the poorer parts of the world, not just because that's the right thing to do, but if it's not dealt with throughout the whole globe, then it will mutate and come back and bite everybody. So do you think that as a consequence of this, we've become more globally aware and more aware perhaps that, this fragile Earth is our own little spaceship sailing through the universe, and, we all better collectively look after it a bit better? Do you agree with that?
I think they're saying that we're all in it together, but the impact has been different. Again, the same from a local perspective, working from home or, staying at home will have more impact on certain people than others. So it's the same with the vaccine, the same with everything else. So each country to their own, from their own perspective. I think the pharmaceutical companies will look at it very much from an economic perspective in terms of what's right for them. And I think that's where it's been a race in terms of first mover advantage, who's gonna get the vaccine out, and then there's going to be a race to a certain level in terms of who's going to approve it and get it out to their masses as well. And we're seeing that and have seen that. So from that perspective, I think yes, the awareness is there, but we're not all equal. We will look at it from a different perspective, but different viewpoints, and that diversity or that variation will be quite obvious to see.
And do you think it'll change the way that businesses behave in terms of sourcing materials and components from overseas? Do you think that there will be a tendency to think, well, hang on, is it wise to be so dependent on countries like China? And do you think that some of the supply chains will change, perhaps shorten, with more manufacturing of at least the vital commodities bought closer to home? Or do you think we'll continue as we have been?
I think there is change, and there's no doubt people thinking in terms of procurement, in terms of supply chain has already shifted. In terms of the lead times that were there traditionally, they are less and less appropriate, particularly when you need to move fairly quickly. We've seen the difficulties and some of the issues that have arisen, particularly with PPE equipment, the unreliability of it, the lack of equipment, the wastage that's happened, the bad procurement that has happened, and part of that now is using local bases, relying more on local manufacturing that you can control more, and a lot of that is also having internal alliances is from a country perspective to rely on your own to produce what the country needs.
I mean, do you think that this pandemic will slow down the process of globalization, or do you think it'll speed it up because there'll be a greater recognition of that, we're all dependent upon each other? What are your thoughts in terms of the impact on globalization?
I mean, globalization is there. I mean, digital products, people are now looking at selling to the world, online courses, anything digital. That's still going on, and that is happening at a faster pace. Education is being transported, media and so forth. Those are things that are there, but it's just the tangible things. That's where possibly it's about manufacturing more locally, manufacturing more in terms of your own control. So you'll have more global businesses, but maybe small global businesses, and having a combination of both really. So it's not just one way in terms of, it's let's just outsource this, or let's just go where the cheapest base of manufacturing is, but also considering all the other constraints and issues and so forth.
I mean, in terms of the lessons that apply to your business, I mean, obviously you have two businesses which are very significantly sort of implicated. One, of course, the domiciliary care, where some real heroes have arisen, and you've talked about some of the issues around PPE. And of course, the training business, the apprentices and vocational training. Obviously, people are increasingly learning online. They're increasingly using technology to communicate. that was probably something that was happening already, but do you think that will accelerate or change, or do you think we'll want to go back to wanting to meet face to face? How do you think that will work?
I think there's certain things that are now part of our belief system, part of what we're comfortable with. People are much more comfortable with a hybrid type situation. Many surveys are out there in the public domain where it's not necessarily one or the other, it's a combination. And a lot of it is about individual choice. We've got situations where, we're trying to be as flexible as we can, but at the same time, it's not about for us saying to people, you have to work from home or you have to work from the office. What works for that particular person, what works for the team, and giving people a choice ultimately. In terms of direct impact on our businesses, yes, health and social care, we've been on the front line, and really have to congratulate all our managers and our team members in terms of, carrying on 7 days a week continuously. And there is no rest in that business. And, often you're working 18 hours plus in terms of cover, and it's continuous. We provide sometimes 24 hours live-in care as well, so it's continuous in terms of cover, giving that support as well. And what we found is that at times the carers themselves have been pressurized by family members to take a break, to stop working and so forth. And what we found is that the individuals weren't necessarily doing it for the money, but they're doing it in terms of their commitment, their dedication for the role, and understanding their duty and their responsibility. And that came to the surface, particularly with regard to the health and social care business. In terms of the training arm, the training company, that's been a mixed bag in terms of how we delivered. In some cases, it's gone very, very quickly online, digital by default. So automatically we're now thinking from a digital online as opposed to face-to-face. So online in terms of recruiting of learners, online in terms of inducting learners, coaching, doing the assessments online. So very much digital by default. And then we're looking at also at the same time giving people some element of choice, putting together some element of face-to-face where we need to, some coaching, working with people in their own time really. So on-demand type learning. So if they want to work or study at a faster pace, then working with those individuals as well. The foster care, very similar as well. So what we found is that, we've had a surge in potential individuals looking to become foster carers, people who've been made redundant, changes in jobs, looking at foster caring as an opportunity to give back as well as earn a living and contribute to society. So people are, have looked at things completely differently this year in terms of their outlook, and I think we've got to recognise that there hasn't been a one-size-fits-all.
In terms of social care, that's obviously you can't cook somebody a meal or wash them, or you can't do that from home, which is obviously perhaps worth remembering that there are a lot of jobs which cannot be done from home. In terms of education and training, do you think that there will be a change in terms of how different qualifications are valued? For example, what I'm getting at is, there will be jobs clearly lost in sort of hospitality in particular. Whether they'll recover over time, I don't know. But as a consequence of that, do you think more people might be looking for apprenticeship type vocational training because they're forced to look at change of career?
I think firstly the skills that people are now looking at is the first thing. So it's not necessarily experience from the past. So you might have had X amount of experience, but it's about what your transferable, adaptable skills are. Having digital skills is probably up there. There's not many jobs now where you could do a a role without having digital skills. Even in terms of the care sector, we've got apps that the individual carers have to utilize to log in, log out, read care plans and so forth. So it is very much one of the key skills that most businesses will look at in terms of that. So that's the first thing. So you've got a digital divide where some individuals have never really used technology. Even to a certain level, we've got long-term unemployed. They can't claim universal credit if they don't have an email address. They're not digitally inclined. So what we're finding is that digital really is the basic skill set that most people will have, and then it's different levels of digital skills. Getting online is a base, but then it's different levels of those digital skills, and the more digital savvy you are, the more digital native you are, then you'll find that you're more adaptable to different jobs, different roles. There's not many jobs now where you can get away with very little digital skills.
You've talked about the recovery being a long one. Do you think we will ever return to what we used to know as normal, or do you think the world has changed forever?
I think there has been change. It's whether what part of that is permanent change, and what part of that is change for now, and where that's likely to stretch back to. Nobody can really say with certainty exactly where we're going to be. Sometimes we have short memories. As humans, we revert back to our core very quickly, and other times once stretched, we never go back. So in certain areas, it is going to be part of how we do things. Most of us are now using click and collect, and that's something that I can't see how that's not going to be used as we go along. I think these are part of our norms now. Working from home to a certain level is part of our norm. My brother, who's in the pharmaceutical sector, he's already been told that they're going to carry on working from home for at least another half a year, 6 months. So these are things that are there, and we have to sort of appreciate and understand that whatever timescale that we're thinking, it's not necessarily going to work exactly to our thinking and our plan.
I mean, looking at the economic situation and the level of borrowing, all right, interest rates are low at the moment, but I mean, how are we going to ever pay for this?
I think we need to appreciate the fact that most of the money that has been pumped into the economy and into people's bank accounts and resources has been borrowed money, whether that's bounce back loans secured, supported by the government, the CBILS, Corona Business Interruption Loan Schemes, the Job Retention Scheme. All of these have been sparked by government support. This is traditionally borrowed money, and it is adding to the total debt for the country, which is exceeding 2 trillion. Figures are unprecedented in that respect, and that has to be looked at and paid back. We realise that government's also looking at jobs and job creation through the Kickstart scheme, through sort of putting more money into traineeships, supporting businesses. And at the end of the day, if it comes from government, it is taxpayers' money. And, if that's been borrowed, then somehow the taxpayers have to pay it back. And, it is going to come ultimately from tax.
Just to remind people that are listening to this that this is part of a series, and previous episodes can, of course, be obtained from your podcast supplier. We've gone slightly off tangent in this episode because we had to talk about this particular issue, but the series is based essentially around Saf's Canny Bites book. I just wonder, Saf, whether you think that there might be some lessons from COVID that you might at some stage think about writing about.
Yeah, I think. I'm already sort of thinking in terms of, how this will impact on the work-life balance, the work-life choice question. that's probably the biggest aspect of it. People have appreciated, what works for them. I think we've all been a little bit more reflective this year. We've counted our blessings. Some of us have got off the hamster wheel and looked around us and been more conscious and be more aware. I would say our consciousness level, our awareness level, understanding ourselves is probably at the greatest level that it has been. And for me, that's about, and that's a good thing, being emotionally aware, emotionally savvy, something that you can actually reflect on. It's been a year of reflection. I think we've got to appreciate the positives that have come out of this. And again, we've talked about some of the negatives as well. The mental health aspect of it, the loneliness part of it as well. The fact that people have, to a certain level, felt isolated, and we're generally more aware of these issues and these concerns, and have much more awareness of these factors.
So finally, because sadly, again, we're running short on time, but just finally, has the last period of months given you more time to perhaps do some writing and think about sort of future books, or have you just been as busy as ever but working in a different way?
I think it's you got to go back to what's important, and I try and take a bit of time out. It's sometimes very difficult, but try and take a little bit of time out to think about where we are, to plan a little bit more, and sharpen the saw. And from my perspective, for me personally, that works with some element of creative writing, a little bit more sort of poetry if I can. I like doing that, and just being a bit more in the moment wherever I can. I think these are the sort of ways they're my coping mechanisms. They're the ways that I would try and get the best out of myself.
I mean, it might be the failing football manager's cliche that you have to try and take the positives, but you're absolutely right. And now has come the time to curtail this Canny conversation with a cause. But thanks for listening, and catch up at your convenience.
Thanks for listening to this Canny conversation with a cause. These conversations are based upon the Canny Bites books by Safaraz, available on Amazon. To find out more, go online and visit Saf's website, pathwaygroup.co.uk, or join him on social media. He can be contacted at safaraz@pathwaygroup.co.uk.